Marcus Calloway was 40 years old, a commercial contractor who had spent his life building things that would still be standing long after the people who paid for them were gone. He drove a 9-year-old truck with a magnetic company sign he could peel off when he didn't want the attention. He wore the same steel-toed boots he'd resold twice because they'd molded to his feet, and good boots are worth keeping. That October, his largest client went bankrupt overnight and froze a payment that represented half a year of his company's revenue. He came home and told his wife the truth. That money was about to be very tight for a while. He had no idea that telling her the truth would show him everything. What she did at 2 a.m., 13 days later, ended the marriage more completely than any lie ever could have. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The job site was still dark when Marcus pulled in at 5:40 that morning. No sunrise yet, just the security lights and the cold and the shape of the half-finished frame against a graying sky. Marcus had spent 18 years building Calloway Construction from a single crew into a company that employed 31 people and carried a reputation no marketing could buy. He paid his subs on time. He never cut a corner he couldn't see. He drove the 9-year-old truck because the money went back into the business, into bonding, into payroll, into the kind of reserves that let a company survive exactly the sort of week he was about to have. What few people knew was that those reserves were deep. Marcus had spent years quietly building a cushion precisely so that one client's collapse could never take his people down with it. The frozen payment hurt. It did not threaten him, but it would look, to anyone watching the day-to-day, like the beginning of the end. He was the kind of man who would rather absorb a loss himself than miss a payroll for someone who trusted him. When he married Vanessa 6 years ago, she had been a boutique manager with expensive taste and a talent for making a room turn toward her. Marcus had covered the gap when her store cut her hours, had funded the cosmetics line she launched and then quietly let fold, had paid for the lifestyle she liked to be photographed inside of. He never made her feel indebted for any of it. He built the floor under her comfort and stepped back so she could stand on it and call the standing her own, because that was what you did for the person you married. You made the support invisible so the ease felt like hers. That was the part she had stopped seeing. The store gap he covered, the line he funded, the house that ran smoothly because he made it run, none of it registered as his anymore. She had grown used to the floor without ever once looking down to see what held it up. She walked through a life he carried and assumed it carried itself, and he let her, because he did not need the credit. He only needed her to stand beside him when standing was hard. That was the one thing he was about to learn she would not do. Then, that October, and everything changed. He did not fake anything. That detail mattered to him later, when he turned the whole thing over in his mind. He had not set a trap. He had simply told his wife the truth, that the Hartwell account had collapsed, that a major payment was frozen in bankruptcy court, that he was going to keep every one of his 31 people paid, even if it meant the household tightened its belt for a while. He told her they should cut back. No more of the standing reservations, the weekend trips, the open-ended card, just for a few months, until it cleared. He watched her face while he said it. He noticed, the way he noticed things, that her first reaction was not concern for him or for the company or for the people whose paychecks he was protecting. Her first reaction was a quick, calculating stillness, the look of a person privately doing math about herself. She said the right words a beat too late. She said, "Of course, whatever you need, we'll get through it." He filed the timing away, quietly, without deciding yet what it meant. He had told her the truth to share a burden. What he got instead was a window. 3 days later, the small economies he'd asked for had not happened. The card statement still showed the salon, the boutique, the standing dinner reservation. He said nothing. He started paying closer attention, not because he had planned to test her, but because a man who notices things cannot stop noticing once something is off. He saw that she had grown quieter and more occupied at once. He saw her step into the other room to take calls. He saw the screen of her phone angle away from him at the kitchen table, an instinct she had never had before. He filed each of these away the way he filed a wiring discrepancy on a site, without alarm, without announcement, just the steady accumulation of things that did not line up. What Marcus had built over 18 years was not just a company. It was a reputation that traveled, and a network of people who told him things. One of those people was his bookkeeper, a woman named Della, who had kept his books for 11 years and missed nothing. It was Della who called him on the second Tuesday of the tight month and asked, in a careful, even voice, whether he was aware that someone had made an inquiry through a third party about whether Callaway Construction was about to file for bankruptcy. He was not aware. He asked who. Della said she didn't have a name yet. But the inquiry had come from someone trying to find out how much of the company would be considered a marital asset in the event of a divorce, and how quickly. He drove that night to the one place that still felt like solid ground. He drove to his aunt, Loretta's. Loretta was 65, small and straight-backed, silver hair cut close, with the level gaze of a woman who had spent 30 years as a paralegal reading the documents that decided how families came apart. She had retired 2 years ago. She had not stopped noticing things. She let Marcus in just after 8 and did not seem surprised to see him. She made him eat first. She put a plate in front of him and would not let him talk until it was clean. Only then did she sit across her small kitchen table, fold her hands, and say what she had been waiting to say. "I'm going to tell you what I saw," Loretta said. "And then I'm going to show you what I kept." Her kitchen was small and warm and smelled like coffee and cedar and something faintly sweet. She opened a drawer under the dish towels and took out a folder that was not thin. "Vanessa called me 5 weeks ago," she said, "before your client ever collapsed. She wanted to know how a wife protects herself if a husband's business starts to go under. She was asking how to get ahead of it. She had already decided which way she'd jump if the money ever looked shaky." Loretta's mouth tightened. Then the money looked shaky, and she jumped. Marcus said nothing. He turned his fork once on the empty plate. "I didn't tell you," Loretta said, "because a question isn't a crime, and a feeling isn't proof. So I started keeping things, copies of what came across my path. The dates, the names she used." She slid the folder across the table. "Eat first was for you. The rest is for her." He opened it and read it the way he read a set of plans, not line by line, but for the whole, feeling for where the load actually rested. The first thing he saw was a record of an account Vanessa had opened in her name alone 6 weeks earlier, before the Hartwell collapse, before any of this could have looked like a reasonable precaution. Into it, over those weeks, she had quietly moved just under $70,000, siphoned in pieces from the joint household account, the account Marcus funded, small enough each time to pass unnoticed by a man who trusted his wife not to count against him. She had been building her own exit fund while telling him, of course, whatever you need. He read it once. Then he folded the page in half and in half again and laid it flat on the table. "There's more," Loretta said. The man on the other end of the quiet calls was named Dorsey, a former regional manager from the boutique world who now sold high-commission investment products of dubious quality. The $70,000 was not just an exit fund. Some of it had already gone into one of Dorsey's products, and the inquiry about Callaway Construction's bankruptcy had come through Dorsey's office. Vanessa had not simply prepared to leave a man she thought was sinking. She had begun positioning to claim a share of a company she believed was about to be worth pennies, to file while it looked broke, lock in a settlement against a failing business, and walk before anyone discovered the reserves were still intact. Marcus looked at the dates. He didn't say anything. The questions to his aunt predated the Hartwell collapse by a week. She had not panicked in a crisis. She had been waiting for one, and when his honest warning gave her the opening, she had moved. He looked at everything on the table. The hidden account. The siphoned $70,000. Dorsey. The bankruptcy inquiry. He could see the whole shape of it now, the way you see how a structure will fail once you trace every load to its true bearing point. He had not tested her. He had told her the truth and watched her treat it as an opportunity. The 2A. M. That would end, it was still coming. But the marriage, he understood now, had already ended weeks before, in a phone call to a paralegal, made before there was anything to be afraid of. "What do you want to do?" Loretta asked. He thought about it for a long time. He set his hand flat on the folder. "Nothing yet," he said. He didn't move fast. That was the part she could never have accounted for. If he had wanted fast, it could have been done that same night. One call to his attorney. One freeze on the joint account. One conversation that ended it on the spot. But Marcus had learned something. In 18 years of building, you do not stop a pour halfway because you found a flaw. You let it set. You document exactly where the flaw is, and you address it once the structure has revealed its full shape. Acting too early would only tell her what he knew and let her hide the rest. So he would let it cure. He would keep his face the same. He would say nothing she could read. So he kept the tight money story going, not as a trap he had built, but as a truth he simply did not correct. He let her go on believing the company was sinking, because her belief was now the most honest source of information he had. A person who thinks you are going under will show you exactly who they are. And 13 days into the lean month, at 2 a.m., she showed him. Marcus woke to the bed empty beside him and a thin line of light under the bedroom door. He did not call out. He got up, quietly, and he saw her at the kitchen table, the laptop open, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and fast. He stood in the dark hallway and he listened, and he did not move. She was talking to Dorsey. She thought the call was safe. She thought Marcus was asleep. She thought she had a window. She said she was moving the rest of it tonight, while she still could, before the company filing made everything messy. She said she'd already had the papers drawn up. She said, and this was the part Marcus would remember with perfect clarity for the rest of his life, that the best part was how easy it had been, because Marcus was so trusting he'd practically handed her the timing himself when he told her the business was failing. She laughed, softly, so as not to wake him. Marcus did not make a sound. He stood in the dark, and he watched his wife empty the last of the joint account into the account she thought he didn't know about, at 2 a.m, laughing about how trusting he was. He did not throw the door open. He did not turn on the light and confront her. He went back to bed, and he lay still, and in the morning he poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of her, like always, and he said good morning, and he went to work. The not reacting was not weakness. It was the most disciplined thing he had ever done, and it cost him more than she would ever know. But he had filed it all away now, every word, and the time to act would come when the structure had fully set. Meanwhile, Vanessa believed she had already won. She grew lighter in the following days, almost cheerful. The way a person is when they think the hard part is behind them. She began, subtly, to talk about the future in the singular. She called her attorney and described the settlement she expected from a failing business, her voice carrying the ease of a woman filing paperwork for a result already decided. She said something to him once, in passing, that he kept. She said, "I just hope, whatever happens with the company, we can both land somewhere we're happy." She said it warmly. It was the kind of prepared kindness that arrives too smooth. He nodded and said he hoped so too. He wanted to remember the exact shape of a woman, wishing him well while she carried his money out the door. Patience was his most practiced skill. It was simply the one she had never had reason to watch him use. His attorney, a methodical man named Pruitt, who returned calls before dawn and never added drama to heavy facts, listened to the whole of it and said only one thing at first. "Don't do anything yet," Pruitt said. "She's about to file against a company she thinks is bankrupt. Let her represent its value to the court. Then we correct the record." That was exactly what happened. Vanessa filed 3 weeks later, requesting an immediate division on the grounds that the marital business was insolvent and her financial security was at risk. She swore to a failing company. She swore she'd had no choice but to protect herself. She built her entire claim on the belief that the contractor was going under. Marcus arrived 30 minutes early to the settlement conference. He liked it that way. On a job site, the man who arrived last was already behind. The conference room sat on the 10th floor. Long table, pale walls, nothing on them. The city visible through a wall of glass. The light was flat and bright. The room was quiet in a way that was different from polite silence. Pruitt arrived first. Then Della, the bookkeeper with the company's true financials. Then Loretta, who had asked to be there and whom Marcus had not refused. They arranged the documents along their side of the table in order and said almost nothing. The only sound was paper settling on wood. Vanessa came in at 9:03 with her attorney and, a step behind, Dorsey, whom she introduced as a financial advisor. That was the first signal. She crossed the room with the confidence of a woman who believed it was already decided. She glanced at Marcus once, a soft, almost pitying look, the look you give a man you've already finished mourning. Then she looked away. Her attorney opened. "Thank you all for coming. Given the insolvency of the marital business and my client's resulting financial exposure, we're seeking an expedited." "Before we proceed," Pruitt said, evenly, not cold, simply precise, "there are several matters that must be entered into the record. They will materially change the court's understanding of both the business and the conduct of the parties." He opened the folder. He laid the first document on the table. The marital business is not insolvent. Callaway Construction experienced a single frozen receivable due to a client's bankruptcy. That receivable is recoverable, and the company holds cash reserves well in excess of it. He laid down the audited statement. Independently verified. The company's net value is $41 million. The room did not move. Vanessa's expression did not change, or rather, she worked to keep it from changing, and that effort was visible to anyone watching closely enough. Marcus was watching closely enough. Dorsey shifted in his seat. He had stopped looking relaxed. Pruitt placed the second document down. Over the 6 weeks preceding this filing, and beginning before the client bankruptcy that allegedly created the financial emergency, approximately $70,000 was transferred out of the joint marital account into an account held solely in Mrs. Callaway's name. A portion was then placed into a product sold by the gentleman introduced today as a financial advisor. Vanessa's attorney had stopped writing. He was reading the page in front of him very carefully. Pruitt placed the third document down and slid it toward the center. We want to be precise about what we are and are not saying. We are not asking this body to render judgment today. We are entering into the record that these transfers predated the claimed emergency, that the funds were moved into accounts and instruments connected to a third party present in this room, and that the petition's representation of an insolvent business is contradicted by audited fact. Vanessa's face went through several things in 2 seconds: recognition, calculation, and then the specific look of a person watching a structure they built realize it was standing on the wrong foundation. The silence in the room lasted 11 seconds. Marcus counted them. "We'll recess," Vanessa's attorney said quietly, "so I can confer with my client." Marcus stood. He gathered nothing from the table. Everything on it had already done its work. He buttoned his jacket. He shook Pruitt's hand and Della's, and he walked toward the door. He stopped once beside Vanessa's chair. He said it quietly, only for her, not as performance, because it was meant for her. "I told you the truth," he said. "You're the one who decided what to do with it." He walked out without looking back. It did not happen all at once. The audited reality unwound her filing completely. The business she'd sworn was insolvent was solid. The emergency she claimed had begun weeks before the event that supposedly caused it. And the $70,000 she'd moved became money she had to account for rather than keep. The product Dorsey had sold her turned out to carry penalties that ate much of what she'd put in. Within weeks of telling her advisor how easy it had all been, Vanessa was the one explaining transfers to a court, with no failing company to claim against, and a sum of money that had largely evaporated. She was not ruined publicly. She was simply smaller. The lifestyle she'd grown used to had never been hers to begin with, and without the man who had quietly carried it. It contracted to the size of what she could actually hold. The people who had photographed her at the good restaurants stopped including her. The calls she made began going to voicemail. She carried the weight of what she had chosen the way a person carries something they cannot set down. Not dramatically, just constantly. Marcus was building something, not loudly. The way he built everything. The Hartwell receivable came through within the year, exactly as Pruitt had predicted. He never missed a payroll. Not one of his 31 people ever knew how close they had supposedly come, because they never had. He brought on 2 apprentices that spring, kids who reminded him of himself at 20. He answered every call the same day. He gave accurate timelines and hit them. 14 months later, Callaway Construction landed the largest contract in its history. The anchor build on a downtown block, valued at the close at just over $41 million, the same number an audited statement had once placed quietly on a conference table. Marcus stood on that site the morning the steel went up, his name on the permit board. One hand on a beam he'd specified himself, because he still liked to feel the work. Della, who had caught the first thread of all of it with a single careful phone call, had been made the company's controller. He had insisted on it. He did not forget the people who chose to tell him the truth. In his aunt's kitchen, on the windowsill above the sink, there was a small snake plant in a clay pot. Loretta had given it to him the night he showed up with a folder he hadn't yet opened. No card, just the plant. He took it home when the house was fully his again. He watered it on Sundays. On a cool evening in October, a year to the season from the night the call had come, Marcus sat on the back steps of the house with a glass of water beside him and his resoled boots still on. He listened to the neighborhood settle into night. A screen door, a dog down the block. The quiet that comes when a day's work is fully done. He thought for a moment about a line of light under a bedroom door and about how small that night looked now, the way a flaw you found and fixed looks small once the structure it threatened is standing and sound. There were new plans rolled out on the table inside, waited at the corners, waiting for morning. He finished his water. He went in and turned out the light. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.